Have you ever walked into a room and had your entire world collapse in a single heartbeat? Picture this. A woman stands frozen in the doorway of her own bedroom, wedding dress pulled at her feet, staring at the two people she trusted most in the world tangled in her silk sheets. This isn't just betrayal. This is annihilation. This is the story of how one woman's perfect life became her greatest nightmare, and how she turned that nightmare into their reckoning. The champagne cork popped with a celebratory burst, echoing through the marble halls of the Montgomery estate. Tomorrow was supposed to be the happiest day of Isabella Monroe's life. Tomorrow, she would marry Alexander Sterling, the man who had pursued her relentlessly for 3 years, the billionaire heir who had promised her forever beneath the stars of the Amalfi Coast. Tonight was the rehearsal dinner, and Isabella had excused herself early, claiming a headache. The truth? She wanted to prepare a surprise for Alex, a private moment before their wedding, something intimate and memorable. She had spent weeks planning it, coordinating with the staff to leave champagne and rose petals in their bedroom suite. Her heels clicked softly against the imported Italian tiles as she made her way through the east wing of the estate. The Montgomery mansion was a sprawling testament to old money. 20 bedrooms, an indoor pool, gardens that stretched for acres. Soon, half of this would be hers. Soon, she would be Mrs. Isabella Sterling. She smiled to herself, adjusting the silk robe she had changed into. Underneath, she wore the lingerie she had custom-made in Paris. Ivory lace with tiny diamonds sewn into the fabric. Alex's favorite color. She had left the rehearsal dinner unnoticed, or so she thought, eager to steal a few precious moments alone with her fiancé before the chaos of tomorrow. But as she approached the master bedroom, their bedroom, she heard something that made her blood run cold. Laughter. Female laughter. Coming from inside. Isabella's hand froze on the doorknob. The sound was familiar, hauntingly so. Couldn't be. Her mind raced through possibilities, each one more innocent than the last. Maybe Alex was on the phone. Maybe he was watching something on his laptop. Maybe. She turned the handle slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs so hard she thought it might break through. The door opened silently on its well-oiled hinges, and what Isabella saw in those first 3 seconds would be seared into her memory forever. The bedroom was bathed in candlelight. Her candles. The champagne she had ordered sat open on the nightstand, 2 glasses half empty. Rose petals were scattered across the floor, across the bed. Her rose petals, and in the center of that bed, naked and intertwined in a way that left no room for misinterpretation, were Alexander Sterling and Vivian Monroe. Her sister. Isabella's vision blurred. The room tilted. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what her eyes were showing her. Alexander's hands were tangled in Vivian's blonde hair the same shade as Isabella's, but longer, shinier, always more beautiful. Vivian's back was arched, her head thrown back in ecstasy. Her lips parted in that same laugh Isabella had heard from the hallway. Time moved in slow motion. Isabella watched as Alex's eyes opened, as his gaze landed on her standing in the doorway. She watched as recognition dawned on his face, as shock and something else. Was that annoyance? Flickered across his features. She watched as he didn't immediately pull away, didn't scramble to cover himself, didn't look even remotely sorry. Isabella. Her name on his lips sounded like a curse. You weren't supposed to be here. Not, I'm sorry. Not, this isn't what it looks like. Just, you weren't supposed to be here. Vivian turned then, her crystal blue eyes meeting Isabella's darker ones. And what Isabella saw in her sister's face was worse than the betrayal itself. There was no shame, no regret, no horror at being caught. There was triumph.
Pure, undiluted satisfaction.
Oh, Bella, Vivian purred, making no move to cover her naked body. She sat up slowly, deliberately, her hand trailing possessively across Alex's chest. Did you really think he loved you? The words hit Isabella like physical blows. Her knees buckled, and she grabbed the doorframe to stay upright. How long? Her voice came out as a broken whisper. Alexander finally had the decency to grab a sheet, though he wrapped it around his waist with maddening casualness, as if they were discussing the weather. Does it matter? How long? Isabella's voice grew stronger, fueled by the rage beginning to boil beneath her shock. Vivian laughed again. That same crystalline sound that had once brought Isabella comfort during their childhood. Now it sounded like breaking glass. Since the beginning, sister dear. Since the very first night he kissed you at the Bennington Gala. Do you remember? You were wearing that horrible green dress that washed out your complexion. Isabella remembered. It had been the night she thought she had found her soulmate. Alex had followed her onto the balcony, had told her she was the most beautiful woman in the room, had kissed her under the stars while fireworks exploded over the Manhattan skyline. It had been magical. It had been perfect. It had been a lie. I was there too, you know, Vivian continued, sliding off the bed with feline grace. She pulled on Alex's discarded shirt, a gesture so intimate it sent fresh waves of nausea through Isabella. In the garden below, Alex and I had already been seeing each other for 2 months. But then Daddy announced he was changing his will, making you the primary heir to Monroe Industries because you actually worked for the company. Poor Alex here couldn't have that. Could you, darling? Alexander stood, and there was no apology in his posture, no remorse in his eyes. Instead, there was cold calculation. Your father controls a tech empire worth $4 billion. Isabella, did you really think I pursued you for your sparkling personality? Each word was a knife. Isabella felt them cutting into her, shredding the life she thought she knew. The business was always going to be yours, Alexander continued, straightening his shoulders. Vivian is charming but irresponsible. Your father would never trust her with Monroe Industries. But you, studious, serious, boring Isabella, you were the golden child, the heir apparent. So you pretended to love me to get to my inheritance? Isabella's voice cracked on the word love. Not pretended, Vivian interjected, moving to stand beside Alex. They looked perfect together. Isabella realized with sickening clarity. 2 beautiful, cruel people cut from the same cloth. He tolerated you. There's a difference. Isabella's hand moved instinctively to the engagement ring on her finger, a 10-carat diamond that had belonged to Alex's grandmother. She looked down at it, this symbol of promises and futures, and felt something inside her snap. Not break, snap, like a wire pulled too tight, recoiling with dangerous force. The wedding, she said slowly, her mind beginning to work again, pushing through the pain. Tomorrow. There are 300 guests. The press. My father signed the merger papers last week, combining Sterling Enterprises and Monroe Industries under our future marriage. Alex smiled, and it was the smile of a predator. Exactly. And you're going to walk down that aisle tomorrow, Isabella. You're going to smile and say, I do. And you're going to keep your mouth shut about this. Why would I do that? Isabella's voice was ice now, all tears frozen. Because if you don't, Vivian said, examining her manicured nails with studied disinterest, we'll tell Daddy the truth. We'll tell him you've been embezzling money from Monroe Industries. We'll show him the falsified documents we've been creating for months. We'll destroy you. Isabella's blood turned to ice water. What? We've been very thorough, Alex added, pulling out his phone and scrolling through what looked like financial documents. Bank accounts in your name in the Cayman Islands. Transfers that trace back to your computer. Email chains showing you've been selling company secrets to competitors. It's all very convincing. No one would believe that. My father knows me. Your father is a businessman, Vivian interrupted. He'll believe the evidence. And even if he doesn't, even if he suspects we framed you, the damage will be done. The scandal will destroy Monroe Industries. The stock will crash. Investors will flee. Everything your grandfather built, everything Daddy has worked for will crumble. And it will be your fault for not playing along. Isabella looked between them, these 2 people she had loved most in the world, and saw them clearly for the first time. Alex, with his aristocratic features and dead eyes. Vivian, with her beauty and rotted soul. They had planned this. Every moment, every kiss, every whispered promise. It had all been orchestrated to get to this moment. "So here's what's going to happen," Alex said, moving closer to Isabella. She flinched, but he kept coming, backing her against the wall. He was so close she could smell Vivian's perfume on his skin. "Tomorrow you're going to be the perfect bride. You're going to smile for the cameras. We're going to get married, and in 6 months, after all the paperwork is finalized and I have full access to the Monroe fortune, we'll have a quiet, amicable divorce. You'll get a settlement. Generous enough that you won't starve, but small enough that you'll know your place." "And what about Vivian?" Isabella whispered. Alex's smile widened. "Vivian will be there. In the shadows. In my bed. Where she's always been." "What if I say no?" Isabella's voice was barely audible. "What if I walk out right now and tell everyone the truth?" "Then we press send," Vivian said, holding up her own phone. "These documents go to the SEC, the FBI, and every major news outlet. By morning, Isabella Monroe will be the most hated woman in America. Your father will have a heart attack. He's already on medication, you know. The stress might actually kill him, and you'll spend the next 10 years in legal hell, even if you're eventually proven innocent." Isabella felt the walls closing in. They had her trapped. Perfectly, completely trapped. If she went through with the wedding, she'd be selling herself into a loveless marriage with a man who despised her, watching her sister play mistress for as long as Alex deemed necessary. If she refused, her father's life's work would be destroyed, his health would collapse, and she'd be branded a criminal. "I need time to think," Isabella managed. "You have until tomorrow at 4 p.m., Alex said, stepping back. "That's when you walk down the aisle. Think fast." Isabella turned and fled, not bothering to close the door behind her. She ran through the mansion's halls, her silk robe billowing behind her, tears finally streaming down her face. She ran past family portraits and priceless art, past the ballroom where tomorrow's reception would be held, past the conservatory where she had imagined her children playing someday. She ran until she reached the estate's chapel, a small stone building on the edge of the property where she and Alex were supposed to exchange vows. She collapsed on the front steps, gasping for air, her entire body shaking with sobs. How had she been so blind? The signs had been there. Alex's phone calls he'd taken private, the weekends he claimed to be on business trips, Vivian's smug smiles whenever Isabella talked about wedding plans. She had ignored it all, too in love, too trusting, too stupid to see the truth. But as Isabella sat there in the darkness, something began to shift inside her. The pain was still there, sharp and terrible, but beneath it, something else was growing. Something cold and hard and furious. They thought they had won. They thought they had her cornered, with no moves left to make. They thought she would either submit or self-destruct. They were wrong. Isabella stood slowly, wiping the tears from her face. Her hands were steady now. Her breathing had calmed. She looked up at the chapel, at the cross silhouetted against the moonlight, and made a decision that would change everything. She wasn't going to run. She wasn't going to submit. She was going to do something they would never expect. She was going to destroy them both. The morning after, Isabella didn't sleep. She spent the night in the estate's library, surrounded by legal documents, financial records, and her laptop glowing in the darkness. By the time dawn broke over the Montgomery estate, she had a plan. It was dangerous. It was audacious. It required perfect timing and nerves of steel. But it would work. At 7 a.m., she returned to her room. A different room, far from the master bedroom and its terrible memories. She showered, washing away the last traces of the woman she had been. The woman who trusted easily and loved blindly. That woman was dead. In her place was someone harder, sharper, ready for war. Her phone buzzed. A text from her father. "Can't wait to walk my little girl down the aisle today. So proud of you, Bella." Isabella's jaw tightened. He had no idea what his favorite daughter and his future son-in-law had planned. He was walking into a trap and she was the bait. Not anymore. There was a knock at the door. "Miss Monroe? The stylist is here for your hair and makeup." "Send her in," Isabella called, her voice steady. The next 6 hours were a blur of preparations. The stylist worked on her hair, creating an elaborate updo with fresh flowers woven through. The makeup artist gave her a flawless, bridal glow. The seamstress made final adjustments to her dress, a stunning Vera Wang creation worth more than most people's houses. Through it all, Isabella's phone never stopped buzzing. Well-wishers, relatives arriving at the estate, the wedding planner confirming final details, and one message that made Isabella's blood sing with dark satisfaction. From Alex, "You made the right choice. See you at the altar." He thought she had submitted. He thought fear had won. He was about to learn otherwise. At 3:30 p.m., Isabella stood before the full-length mirror in her bridal suite. She looked like a fairy tale princess, white dress flowing around her like clouds, diamond tiara catching the light, bouquet of white roses in her hands. She looked innocent and pure and happy. She looked like a lie. "You ready, sweetheart?" Her father appeared in the doorway, distinguished in his tuxedo, eyes misty with emotion. Isabella turned to him and smiled. It was the last genuine smile she would give for a very long time. "I'm ready, Daddy." They walked through the mansion together, her arm linked through his. 300 guests waited in the estate's formal garden, where an altar had been erected beneath an arch of white roses. The string quartet played Pachelbel's canon. The sun shone brilliantly. It was perfect. As they approached the garden, Isabella could see Alex at the altar, looking devastatingly handsome in his tuxedo. Beside him stood his best man, his cousin Marcus. And there, in the front row, wearing a pale pink dress and a satisfied smile, sat Vivian. This was the moment. The moment Isabella was supposed to submit, to play her role, to become Mrs. Alexander Sterling and seal her own fate. Instead, Isabella stopped walking. Her father looked at her, confused. "Bella, I need to tell you something, Daddy," Isabella said, her voice clear and strong. "And everyone here needs to hear it." Alex's face went white. Vivian half rose from her seat. The guests began to murmur. Isabella turned to face the crowd, still holding her father's arm. "Thank you all for coming today to celebrate what should have been the beginning of my new life. Instead, you're here to witness the end of a very elaborate lie." "Isabella," Alex started forward, but Marcus grabbed his arm. "Last night," Isabella continued, her voice projecting across the garden, "I walked in on my fiancé in bed with my sister. But that's not the interesting part. The interesting part is what they told me afterward." The crowd erupted. Gasps, shouts, the sound of chairs scraping as people stood up. Isabella's father turned to her, his face stricken. "Bella, what?" "They've been together since the beginning, Daddy. 3 years. Alex only pursued me because of Monroe Industries, because of the inheritance. He never loved me. This was all a con." Vivian was on her feet now, her face red. "She's lying. She's upset because she caught me comforting Alex about wedding jitters. They threatened me." Isabella spoke over her sister. "They said if I didn't go through with the wedding, they would frame me for embezzlement. They've created false documents, fake accounts, evidence that would destroy me and Monroe Industries." Alex was shaking his head, his lawyer mask sliding into place. "This is insane. Isabella, you're clearly having some kind of breakdown." "Am I?" Isabella reached into her bouquet and pulled out a small device, a recording device. She held it up for everyone to see. "Then explain this. Audio from last night. Every word you both said to me." She pressed play. Alex's voice filled the garden, clear and damning. "Did you really think I pursued you for your sparkling personality? Your father controls a tech empire worth $4 billion. Then Vivian. He tolerated you. There's a difference." The recording played on, every threat, every cruel revelation, every detail of their plan laid bare for everyone to hear. By the time it finished, the garden was in chaos. Guests were shouting, phones were out recording, and Isabella's father looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. "You recorded us?" Alex's voice was barely controlled rage. "I recorded everything," Isabella said calmly. After you threatened me, I went back to the bedroom with my phone hidden in my robe. I got every word, every detail of your plan to frame me. It's all documented, time-stamped, and I've already sent copies to my lawyer, my father's lawyer, and yes, the FBI. Vivian lunged at Isabella, but their father caught her. Don't, he said, his voice like iron. His eyes, when they met Isabella's, were filled with pain but also pride. Is this true? All of it? Yes, Daddy. The embezzlement evidence they claim to have? Fabricated. My lawyers are already tracing the fake documents back to their source. It won't hold up for 10 minutes under scrutiny. Her father released Vivian and turned to face Alex. For a moment, Isabella thought he might hit him. Instead, he did something worse. He laughed. It was a cold, brittle sound that made everyone freeze. Do you know what you've done, boy? Robert Monroe said quietly. You've declared war on a family that's been building power and connections for 4 generations. You came into my home, seduced both my daughters, tried to steal my company, and threatened my child. Mr. Monroe, if we could just discuss this rationally, Alex started. Security. Robert's voice boomed across the garden. Escort Mr. Sterling and Miss Vivian Monroe off my property. They are never to return. As security guards materialized from the edges of the garden, Isabella watched Alex's perfect facade finally crack. Panic flickered across his features. Vivian was crying, mascara running down her face, screaming about how this was all a misunderstanding. But the most beautiful moment came when Alex looked at Isabella one last time. In his eyes, she saw the exact moment he realized he had lost everything. The company merger would be canceled. The Sterling family would be humiliated. And Isabella, boring, studious Isabella, had outplayed him completely. This isn't over, Alex hissed as security grabbed his arms. Isabella smiled, and it was a smile with teeth. Oh, darling, it hasn't even started. As they dragged Alex and Vivian away, Isabella turned to face the shocked crowd. 300 of the most influential people in New York society stared back at her. I apologize for the disruption, Isabella said, her voice steady. But I couldn't let this moment pass without the truth being known. Thank you for coming and please enjoy the reception. It would be a shame to waste all this food. Then she turned and walked back toward the mansion, leaving her wedding dress trailing behind her like a conquest flag. Her father caught up with her at the mansion's entrance. Isabella, I'm so sorry. I should have seen. No, Daddy, Isabella interrupted, turning to face him. You trusted the people you loved. That's not a failure. That's human. What are you going to do now? Isabella looked back at the garden, where chaos still reigned. Then she looked at her father and smiled. I'm going to make them pay, both of them, in ways they can't even imagine yet. You don't have to do this alone, her father said. Monroe Industries has resources. I know, Daddy, and I'll need them. Isabella squeezed his hand. But first, I need to become someone they'll never see coming. Someone who can play their game better than they ever could. As Isabella walked up the stairs to her room, she passed a mirror and stopped. The woman looking back at her was still wearing the wedding dress, still had flowers in her hair. But her eyes were different, harder, colder, ready. Tomorrow she would begin her transformation. Tomorrow she would start gathering allies, building her arsenal, preparing for the long game. But tonight, she would allow herself one moment of satisfaction. She had just destroyed Alexander Sterling's perfect plan in front of 300 witnesses. She had exposed Vivian's true nature to the world. She had protected her father's company and her own name. It was a good start. But Isabella Monroe wasn't interested in good starts. She was interested in perfect endings. And this story was far from over. The world forgot about Isabella Monroe remarkably quickly. That's the thing about scandal in high society. There's always a newer, shinier disaster to distract everyone. After her explosive wedding that wasn't. The media feasted on the story for exactly 3 weeks before a celebrity divorce and a political sex scandal pushed her from the headlines. Isabella was grateful for the obscurity. It gave her time to plan. She spent the first month after the wedding in mourning. Not for Alex. She realized with startling clarity that she had never truly known him, but for the version of herself who had been naive enough to trust so completely. That Isabella was gone, buried beneath the ruins of her shattered expectations. The second month she spent getting angry, properly, righteously furious in a way that burned clean and hot. She would wake up at 3 a.m. with her fists clenched, replaying every moment, every lie, every kiss that had meant nothing. Her father worried. Her therapist suggested medication. Isabella suggested they both let her feel what she needed to feel. By the third month, the anger had crystallized into something much more dangerous. Purpose. Isabella Monroe was going to systematically dismantle everything Alexander Sterling held dear. But she wasn't going to do it loudly. She wasn't going to do it obviously. She was going to do it so carefully, so perfectly, that by the time he realized what was happening, it would be far too late to stop. As for Vivian, her sister required a different kind of attention. The law firm of Morrison, Mitchell, and Rose occupied the 52nd floor of a Manhattan skyscraper. Isabella walked through the glass doors at exactly 9 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, wearing a charcoal suit that meant business and heels that clicked with authority. "Miss Monroe," the receptionist said, smiling nervously. Everyone at the firm knew her story. "Mr. Morrison is expecting you." David Morrison was 60 years old, silver-haired, and known as the most ruthless corporate attorney in New York. He was also her godfather, one of her father's oldest friends, and someone who had watched Isabella grow up. "Bella," he said warmly as she entered his corner office. "You look well." "I look ready," Isabella corrected, sitting down across from his massive desk. "Did you review the materials I sent?" David's smile faded, replaced by the sharp expression of a man who had spent 40 years winning impossible cases. "I did. It's ambitious, incredibly risky, and if you pull it off, it will be the most spectacular corporate takedown I've ever witnessed." "Can we do it legally?" "Legally?" David leaned back in his chair. "Yes. Ethically? Also yes. Alexander Sterling and his family have built their empire on some very shaky foundations. Your research was excellent. You found vulnerabilities even my team missed." Over the next hour, they discussed specifics. The Sterling family's main business was Sterling Enterprises, a conglomerate that dealt primarily in real estate and investment. What Isabella had discovered during her engagement, and what she had quietly documented, was that Sterling Enterprises was overextended. They had dozens of properties mortgaged to the hilt, investments that were losing money, and partnerships with companies that were one scandal away from collapse. Alex had been desperate to marry into Monroe Industries not just for the money, but because Sterling Enterprises was hemorrhaging cash. The merger would have saved his family business. Without it, they were vulnerable. "The first target is the Wellington Tower project," Isabella said, pulling out a file. "Sterling Enterprises is the primary developer, but they're only 40% funded. They've been trying to secure additional investors for months with no success. I want to make sure they never get that funding." David nodded. "Your father's connections in the banking sector could ensure that any institution considering investing suddenly develops cold feet." "Exactly. The project fails. Sterling Enterprises takes a massive financial hit, and Alex looks incompetent to his board of directors." "What about the Ravencroft acquisition?" David asked, referring to a property deal that had been in the news lately. Isabella smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Ravencroft is being sold by the Ashford family, correct? And the Ashfords are old friends of the Monroes." "I see where you're going with this. I'm going to buy Ravencroft myself, through a shell corporation. Sterling Enterprises needs that property to expand their portfolio and attract new investors. Without it, their third-quarter projections look terrible. You'll need substantial capital for that. I have my trust fund, and Daddy's offered to back me." David studied her for a long moment. "You've changed, Bella. 6 months ago, you were a woman in love planning a wedding. Now you're planning a corporate assassination. Are you sure this is what you want?" Isabella thought about that night, about the candles and rose petals she had arranged, about walking in on the two people she loved most destroying her. She thought about their laughter, their threats, their absolute certainty that she would submit. "I've never been more sure of anything," she said. The first strike. The collapse of the Wellington Tower project happened on a Thursday afternoon. Isabella watched the news alert pop up on her phone while sitting in a cafe across from the Sterling Enterprises building. The headline read, "Sterling Development Project Loses Major Funding. Future in Question." She took a sip of her coffee and allowed herself a small smile. Phase 1 complete. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. "You." Alex's voice was tight with barely controlled rage. "This was you."
I'm sorry.
Isabella said pleasantly. "You'll have to be more specific. So many things seem to be going wrong for you lately." "Don't play games with me, Isabella." The banks all pulled out of Wellington Tower on the same day. Within hours of each other. That's not coincidence. "Maybe it's karma," Isabella suggested. "I hear that can be quite brutal." There was a pause. When Alex spoke again, his voice had changed. Smoother, more calculated. "We can still fix this. Your father's company and mine. The merger could still happen. We could help each other." Isabella laughed. It was a genuine laugh, full of real amusement. "Oh, Alex, you really think I would ever tie my family's company to your sinking ship? After everything?" "I made mistakes," he said. "I admit that. But this vendetta of yours is going to hurt more people than just me. Think about the workers who'll lose their jobs when Sterling Enterprises downsizes. I think about them," Isabella interrupted coldly. "Which is why I've already established a fund to help any Sterling Enterprises employees who lose their jobs due to their CEO's incompetence. They'll be taken care of. Unlike you." She hung up. Across the street, she saw movement in the Sterling building's executive floor. A figure standing at the window, phone in hand. Even from this distance, she could see the tension in his posture. Good. Let him worry. Let him scramble. Let him feel the walls closing in. This was just the beginning. The sisters' return. Isabella was reviewing documents in her home office when her assistant buzzed her. "Miss Monroe, you have a visitor. Your sister." Isabella's hand tightened on her pen. She had successfully avoided Vivian for 6 months. After the wedding disaster, Vivian had tried to call, to text, to show up at the Monroe estate. Their father had her escorted out every time. Eventually, she had given up and disappeared from public view. "Should I send her away?" her assistant asked nervously. Isabella thought about it. Saying no would be satisfying. But she was curious. What could Vivian possibly have to say to her now? Send her in. But stay close. Vivian looked different. Thinner. Tired. Her designer clothes were a season old. Her hair not quite as perfectly styled as usual. She walked into the office like she was approaching a wild animal, hands slightly raised in a gesture of peace. "Bella," she said, "thank you for seeing me." "I didn't do it for you," Isabella replied without looking up from her papers. "I did it because I want to hear what excuse you've come up with. I imagine you've had 6 months to prepare." Vivian flinched. "I don't have an excuse. What I did was unforgivable. We agree on something. How novel." "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness," Vivian said, sitting down without being invited. "I'm here to offer you information." Now Isabella looked up. "What kind of information?" "About Alex. About Sterling Enterprises. About things you don't know yet." Vivian leaned forward, and Isabella could see genuine fear in her sister's eyes. "He's dangerous, Bella. More dangerous than you realize. And he's planning something. Why would you tell me this? I thought you two were in love." The words dripped with sarcasm. "I thought so too," Vivian said quietly, "until he threw me away the same way he threw you away. Turns out I was just another pawn." Isabella studied her sister, looking for the lie, the manipulation. But all she saw was a broken woman who had finally realized she had been played. "Tell me everything," Isabella said. What Vivian revealed over the next hour was worse than Isabella had imagined. Alex hadn't just been using both sisters. He had been systematically defrauding Sterling Enterprises for years. He had been siphoning money into offshore accounts, cooking the books, and the Wellington Tower project was just one of many schemes designed to cover his tracks. The company is basically a shell, Vivian explained. There's maybe 20 million in actual liquid assets, but they're showing 300 million on paper. It's all a house of cards. And you know this because? Because I helped him set some of it up? Vivian admitted, shame coloring her voice. I thought we were in it together. I thought after you two divorced, he and I would run everything. Instead, 3 weeks after the wedding disaster, he told me I was a liability. He gave me $50,000 and told me to disappear. Why didn't you go to the authorities? Vivian laughed bitterly. And admit I helped him? I go to prison too, Bella. I'm many things, but I'm not stupid enough to implicate myself. Isabella processed this. If what Vivian was saying was true, and it lined up with her own research, then Alex wasn't just a lying ex-fiancé. He was a criminal. A sophisticated one, but a criminal nonetheless. Why tell me this now? Because, Vivian said, meeting her sister's eyes. I want him to suffer. Not financially. Not professionally. I want him to lose everything and end up in a cell. And I know you're the only person smart enough and angry enough to make that happen. Isabella leaned back in her chair, thinking. An alliance with Vivian was unthinkable. The betrayal was too fresh, too deep. But the information she had was invaluable. If I use this information, Isabella said slowly, it's not because we're friends. It's not because I forgive you. It's because destroying Alex is more important than my feelings about you. I understand. And when this is over, I never want to see you again. You're dead to me, Vivian. You understand that? Vivian's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. I understand. Good. Now give me everything you have. Every document, every password, every piece of evidence. And then get out of my sight. After Vivian left, Isabella sat in her office staring at the flash drive her sister had left behind. It contained bank statements, emails, falsified documents, everything she needed to take Alex down permanently. But it also meant escalating from corporate warfare to actual legal destruction. It meant going to the FBI, triggering investigations, potentially sending Alex to prison. Was she ready to go that far? Isabella thought about the woman she had been 6 months ago. That woman would have hesitated, would have worried about mercy, about whether revenge was worth it. But Isabella Monroe wasn't that woman anymore. She picked up her phone and dialed. David? It's Bella. I need you to set up a meeting with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. I have something they're going to want to see. The trap closes. 2 weeks later, Isabella sat in a conference room at the FBI's New York field office. Across from her were 3 agents. Special Agent Sarah Chen, who specialized in financial fraud, Agent Marcus Webb, who handled white-collar crime, and their supervisor, Assistant Director Catherine Walsh. On the table between them lay printed copies of every document from Vivian's flash drive, plus additional evidence Isabella had gathered herself. Miss Monroe, Director Walsh said, studying the materials with sharp eyes. This is quite possibly the most comprehensive financial fraud case I've seen presented by a civilian. Where did you get this information? From someone close to Alexander Sterling who realized what he was doing was wrong, Isabella said carefully. She and Vivian had agreed Vivian would remain anonymous as much as possible, an unnamed source. Agent Chun tapped one of the documents. These offshore accounts, they show systematic money laundering going back 7 years. We're talking about potentially $200 million in fraudulent transactions. And that's just what we can see, Isabella added. There's likely more that's better hidden. Agent Webb looked up from the laptop he'd been studying. The question is, Miss Monroe, why bring this to us? You could have used this information to simply destroy Sterling Enterprises financially. Why push for criminal charges? Isabella met his gaze steadily. Because financial ruin isn't enough. Alex Sterling tried to frame me for embezzlement. He threatened my father's company. He used and manipulated multiple women. Men like that don't learn from losing money, they just find new ways to hurt people. But if he's in prison, then he can't hurt anyone else ever again. Director Walsh nodded slowly. We'll need time to verify this information, build our case. Fraud investigations take months, sometimes years. I understand. And you'll need to be prepared for the public scrutiny. When we arrest Sterling, this will be a major news story. Your name will come up. Your failed wedding will come up. Are you ready for that? Isabella thought about the past 6 months. The pain, the rebuilding, the transformation from heartbroken bride to calculating strategist. She had been through fire. She wasn't afraid of the smoke. I'm ready, she said. Good. Director Walsh stood, extending her hand. Then welcome to the team, Miss Monroe. Let's take this bastard down. The night everything changed again. While the FBI built their case, Isabella focused on the final piece of her revenge. The Ravencroft acquisition. The property was a historic building in downtown Manhattan, prime real estate that Sterling Enterprises desperately needed for their portfolio recovery. Isabella's shell corporation, Blackwood Holdings, had made an aggressive offer, but she knew Alex wouldn't give up easily, which was why she wasn't surprised when her phone rang at 10 p.m. on a Friday night. We need to talk. It was Alex, and he sounded different. Not angry, scared. There's nothing to discuss, Isabella said. Please, in person, tomorrow, the River Cafe, noon. I'll tell you everything. Against her better judgment, Isabella agreed. The River Cafe sat on the Brooklyn waterfront with spectacular views of Manhattan. Isabella arrived early, choosing a corner table where she could watch the entrance. She wore a simple black dress and no jewelry except the watch her father had given her for her college graduation. Alex arrived exactly at noon, and Isabella was shocked by his appearance. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in 6 months. His suit was still expensive but didn't fit quite right, like he'd lost weight. His face was drawn, shadows under his eyes. He sat down without asking permission. Thank you for coming, he said. You have 10 minutes. I know what you're doing, Alex said quietly. Wellington Tower was just the start. You've been systematically destroying every deal I try to make. The Ravencroft property. I know Blackwood Holdings is your shell company. Isabella sipped her water. I don't know what you're talking about. Stop. Alex leaned forward. Please, just stop. I'll give you whatever you want. Money? I'll sign over my personal assets. Public apology? I'll do it. I'll stand in front of the cameras and tell everyone I was wrong. That you were the best thing that ever happened to me. It's a little late for that, don't you think? Isabella, I'm begging you. And to her shock, his voice actually broke. My father is sick. The stress of the company failing is killing him. He's had 2 heart attacks in the past month. If Sterling Enterprises collapses completely, it will kill him. Please. He had nothing to do with what I did to you. For a moment, just a moment, Isabella felt a flicker of sympathy. She thought about her own father, about how devastated she would be if her revenge hurt him. Then she remembered the recording, the casual cruelty in Alex's voice when he explained how he had never loved her. Your father built a company on solid foundations, Isabella said coldly. You turned it into a house of cards to fund your lifestyle and your schemes. If he's dying, Alex, it's because of you, not me. There has to be something I can do. There is one thing. Isabella leaned forward. You can turn yourself in to the FBI. Confess everything. Make a deal. Give them evidence against anyone else involved in the fraud. Maybe they'll reduce your sentence. Maybe your cooperation will save your father's company's reputation, even if you can't save the company itself. Alex stared at her. You went to the FBI? What did you think would happen? That I'd just be content watching you lose business deals? You threatened to frame me as a criminal, Alex. Did you really think I wouldn't respond in kind, except with actual evidence? All color drained from Alex's face. What evidence? You don't have. I have everything, Isabella interrupted. Bank records, emails, falsified documents, phone recordings, every single illegal thing you've done for the past 7 years. And the FBI has had it all for 3 weeks now. Alex stood up so abruptly his chair fell backward. You've destroyed me. You've destroyed my entire family. No, Isabella corrected, standing as well. You destroyed yourself. I just made sure everyone could see it. I loved you, Alex said desperately. Maybe not at first, but eventually I really did. Don't. Isabella's voice was ice. Don't you dare try to rewrite history now. You stood in my bedroom, the night before our wedding, and told me you tolerated me. Those were your exact words. Not pretended. Tolerated. So no, Alex, you never loved me. You loved what I could give you. And now you have nothing. She walked away, leaving him standing there among the upscale lunch crowd. She didn't look back. 3 days later, Alexander Sterling was arrested at his office. The charges included wire fraud, money laundering, securities fraud, and racketeering. The FBI also arrested 4 of his business partners and froze all of Sterling Enterprises' assets. The news was everywhere. Every major outlet ran the story, complete with photos from Isabella's almost wedding, interviews with financial experts discussing the scope of the fraud, and speculation about what would happen to the Sterling family empire. Isabella watched the news from her apartment, a glass of wine in her hand. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Journalists, old friends, curious acquaintances. She ignored them all except one call. Daddy, I just saw the news, her father said. Bella, are you all right? I'm perfect, Isabella said, and realized she meant it. Better than perfect, actually. I'm free. You did this. The investigation, everything. I did. There was a pause. Then her father laughed. A warm, proud sound. That's my girl. You know, I raised you to be strong, to be smart, to never let anyone push you around. But I never imagined you'd be quite this formidable. I learned from the best. What happens now? Isabella looked out her window at the Manhattan skyline. Now I live my life. I build my career. I find someone who actually deserves me. And I never, ever settle for less than I'm worth again. What about Vivian? The question hung in the air. Her sister had provided crucial information, but the betrayal still burned. Vivian made her choices, Isabella said finally. She's facing her own consequences. I'm not going to destroy her, but I'm not going to save her either. She's on her own. After she hung up with her father, Isabella poured herself another glass of wine and stepped onto her balcony. The city lights spread out before her like diamonds on velvet. Somewhere out there, Alex was sitting in a holding cell, facing the reality of his crimes. Somewhere out there, Vivian was alone with her guilt. And here Isabella stood, victorious, vindicated, and very much alive. The revenge was complete. But as she stood there in the cool evening air, Isabella realized something surprising. This wasn't the end she had imagined 6 months ago. She had thought revenge would fill the empty space Alex had left behind, that destroying him would make her whole again. Instead, she just felt free. Free from lies. Free from betrayal. Free from the person she had been when she was desperate to be loved. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had spent 6 months plotting the perfect revenge, and in the process, she had become the person she was always meant to be. Strong, independent, and unwilling to accept anything less than she deserved. Her phone buzzed. A news alert. Sterling Air denied bail. Flight risk concern. Isabella smiled and went back inside. Tomorrow, she had a meeting with her father about expanding Monroe Industries into new markets. Next week, she was finalizing the Ravencroft purchase, which she planned to turn into affordable housing, something the Sterling family would never have done. The future stretched out before her, full of possibilities. And for the first time in months, Isabella Monroe was excited to see what came next. The ultimate payback. 18 months later, the Monroe Industries annual gala was the social event of the season. Held at the Natural History Museum, it attracted celebrities, politicians, business moguls, and anyone who mattered in New York society. This year's theme was Phoenix Rising, which Isabella found deliciously appropriate. She stood at the top of the museum's grand staircase, surveying the crowd below. The ballroom glittered with champagne and diamonds, String quartets played Vivaldi, and everywhere she looked, she saw success. Her success. In the 18 months since Alex's arrest, Isabella had transformed Monroe Industries. She had expanded into green technology, acquired 3 smaller companies, and increased profits by 40%. Forbes had just named her one of their 30 under 30 in business. She was thriving. Miss Monroe. Her assistant appeared at her elbow. "There's someone here who's asking to speak with you. She says it's urgent." "Who?" "A Mrs. Sterling, Alexander's mother." Isabella's hand tightened on her champagne flute. "Where is she?" "The West Gallery. She asked for privacy." Isabella debated sending security to escort the woman out. Margaret Sterling had never been warm to her, even during the engagement. But curiosity won out. The West Gallery housed the museum's gemstone collection. Margaret Sterling stood before a display of sapphires, elegant even in distress. She had aged dramatically. Her hair had gone completely white, and she looked fragile in her black gown. "Mrs. Sterling," Isabella said coolly. Margaret turned. "Miss Monroe, thank you for seeing me. You have 3 minutes. The gala is about to begin." "My son is in prison," Margaret said without preamble. 10 years with possibility of parole after 7. "The company is bankrupt. My husband died 3 months ago. The stress killed him just as Alexander feared. Our family name is ruined." "I'm aware," Isabella said. "I read the newspapers. You did this. You destroyed my entire family."
No.
Isabella's voice was steel. "Your son did this when he chose to commit fraud. When he chose to use people. When he chose to threaten me rather than face the consequences of his actions. I simply made sure justice was served." Margaret's composure cracked. "He loved you. In his way, he did." "Love doesn't look like what your son did to me," Isabella interrupted. "Love doesn't lie, manipulate, or threaten. Love doesn't sleep with your fiancé's sister the night before your wedding. Whatever Alex felt for me, it wasn't love." "I'm not here to defend him," Margaret said quietly. "I'm here to ask you a question. Now that you've won, now that you've taken everything, do you feel better? Does any of this make up for what he did?" The question caught Isabella off guard. She thought about the past 18 months. The victories, the success, the empire she was building. Did any of it actually heal the wound Alex had left? "No," Isabella admitted. "Nothing makes up for betrayal. But that was never the point. The point was making sure he couldn't hurt anyone else. The point was proving to myself that I was stronger than what he did to me. The point was justice." "Justice," Margaret repeated bitterly. "Is that what you call destroying a 75-year-old company and leaving hundreds of people unemployed? I call it consequences. And for the record, I made sure every Sterling Enterprises employee who lost their job received severance packages and job placement assistance through Monroe Industries. Your son's crimes hurt them, not my pursuit of justice." Margaret stared at her for a long moment. "You've become hard, Isabella. Cold." "I've become honest," Isabella corrected. "And I've stopped letting people use my kindness as a weapon against me. If that makes me cold, then I'll wear it as a badge of honor." Margaret turned back to the sapphires. "There's something you should know. Something I came here to tell you specifically." "What?" "Alexander is writing a book. A memoir. He's claiming you framed him, that you planted evidence, that this was all a revenge plot by a jilted woman. His lawyer thinks he can get the conviction overturned on appeal." Isabella felt ice water in her veins. "He confessed. He pled guilty to avoid a longer sentence. He's recanting, claiming coercion. He's found a publisher who thinks it will be a bestseller, the disgraced billionaire, the woman scorned. They're calling it a modern noir tragedy. That's insane. The evidence was independently verified by the FBI." "I know." Margaret met her eyes. "That's why I'm telling you. Because unlike my son, I believe in the truth. And the truth is that Alexander was guilty. He did commit fraud. He did use you. And while I'm angry at what's happened to my family, I'm angrier at him for causing it." Isabella processed this. Why are you warning me? Because you didn't deserve what he did to you, Isabella. I may not have liked you for my son. I always thought he needed someone more pliable, but you didn't deserve the cruelty. And you don't deserve to have your name dragged through the mud again with this book. Margaret reached into her purse and pulled out a flash drive. This contains every piece of evidence the family's private investigators found about Alexander's activities. Things even the FBI didn't uncover. Offshore accounts under different names. More fraud, more victims. If his book comes out, if he tries to claim innocence, you use this. You bury him so completely he never sees daylight again. Isabella took the flash drive, stunned. Why would you give this to me? He's your son. He was my son, Margaret corrected, her voice breaking. The man in that prison cell is someone I don't recognize. Someone who destroyed everything his father and grandfather built. Someone who looked me in the eye and lied for years. I loved Alexander, but I love the truth more. With that, Margaret Sterling walked away, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Isabella stood alone in the gallery, holding the flash drive, trying to process what had just happened. She had expected this chapter of her life to be over. Alex was in prison. Sterling Enterprises was defunct. She had moved on. Apparently, Alex hadn't. The book that never was. Isabella's lawyers shut down the book before it could be published. The publisher, faced with irrefutable evidence of additional fraud that had never been prosecuted, dropped the project immediately. They had no interest in a libel lawsuit from Monroe Industries or additional FBI scrutiny. But the incident reminded Isabella that revenge wasn't a one-time event. It was a commitment. Alex tried again 6 months later, selling his story to a tabloid. Isabella's lawyers shut that down too, threatening legal action that would have bankrupted the publication. He tried a third time through a podcast, finding a sympathetic host who believed in his tale of the evil ex-fiancé. That episode mysteriously never aired after the host received visits from FBI agents with questions about aiding a convicted felon in evading restitution orders. Each time, Isabella felt a grim satisfaction. Alex was learning what she had known for 18 months. She wasn't the naive woman he had manipulated. She was someone far more dangerous. Someone with resources, connections, and an absolute refusal to be anyone's victim ever again. The unexpected complication. Isabella was reviewing quarterly reports when her assistant buzzed her. Miss Monroe? Detective Rivera from the NYPD is here to see you. Isabella frowned. Did he say what it's about? Something about your sister, Vivian. Detective Rivera was a tired-looking man in his 50s with kind eyes and a weathered face. He sat across from Isabella's desk with the air of someone delivering bad news. Miss Monroe, I'm sorry to bother you. I know you and your sister are estranged. That's putting it mildly. What's happened? She was found unconscious in her apartment 3 days ago. Overdose. She's in a medically induced coma at Mount Sinai. Isabella felt her stomach drop. Is she going to survive? The doctors think so, but it was close. Very close. Detective Rivera pulled out a notebook. We found a note. Not quite a suicide note, but close. She talked about guilt, about mistakes she couldn't undo, about a sister she betrayed. Isabella closed her eyes. She had cut Vivian out of her life completely after turning over the evidence to the FBI. She had heard through mutual acquaintances that her sister was struggling. No job, no friends. Their father had disowned her. But Isabella had told herself that Vivian was facing the consequences of her own choices. Now those consequences had nearly killed her. Why are you telling me this, detective? Because you're listed as her emergency contact. And because... He hesitated. Because the hospital needs someone to make medical decisions if she doesn't wake up. Your father refused. Said she was dead to him. Isabella thought about the girl Vivian had been once, before jealousy and ambition had poisoned her. She thought about summers at their grandmother's house, about secrets shared in the dark, about a time when sisters meant everything. That girl was long gone, but maybe she deserved a chance to find her way back. I'll go, Isabella said. The hospital vigil. Vivian looked small in the hospital bed, surrounded by machines and tubes. Her face was pale, her famous blonde hair dull and lifeless. Isabella sat beside her, unsure what to feel. Anger? Yes. Vivian had betrayed her in the worst possible way. Pity? That too. This broken woman was far from the confident, beautiful sister who had stolen her fiancé. Guilt? That was the complicated one. Had Isabella's revenge driven Vivian to this? I don't know if you can hear me, Isabella said quietly. The doctors say maybe you can. So I'm going to say this once, and then we're done. She took a breath. What you did to me was unforgivable. You knew how much I loved Alex. You knew it and you destroyed me anyway, because you were jealous or ambitious or whatever excuse you've told yourself. You betrayed me in the worst way possible. Vivian's machines beeped steadily. But I've spent the last 2 years consumed by revenge. I destroyed Alex. I built an empire. I proved I was stronger than what you both did to me. And you know what? It worked. I am stronger. I am successful. I am happy.